everyone, and welcome to Mappers Episode 5. I am, of course, your host, Nursky, who's a little discombobulated at the moment, because we had a little bit of an interesting start to our show, but you can check that out in the pre-show video, which I'm going to be posting every week now, by the way, up on the YouTube along with the VOD. So I'll be having the pre-show and the regular show up on the VODs on the YouTube and in the show threads and all that. But of course, joining me today is going to be none other than Iron Man over in your bottom right-hand corner of your screen. I have Prodigy in the bottom left, and Super Rue Man, aka Super Late Man, who is the reason for our late start to the show, up in the top right-hand corner of your screen. How's everybody doing today?
Sore.
Great. Yeah, we were talking about that a little bit before the show started. Me and apparently Prodigy are both getting back to working out today. Which can make you a little bit on the sore side. But you know, I actually feel pretty good. I normally feel a lot better when I work out. It gives me more energy. Like, you'd think I'd do the opposite, but I actually feel more energized when I work out on a regular basis.
I feel more energized, but, like, I'm still sore.
Yeah, there's that part of it. You gotta pull the muscles, man. No pain, no gain, man. Let's do this.
Yeah.
To pump you up. So, anyways, guys, we got
little
some...
giants.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pump you up.
Do it hard. Okay.
You must pump it, little man.
Alright, guys.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to get to today's topic, so I'm going to bring those up here. So today we're going to be talking about expectations and how that relates to map trends. We're going to be talking about what makes a map good or bad, specifically the features on a map that make a map a good or a bad map. And then, of course, we'll have our normal Q&A towards the end of the show, and followed by our closings. So we're going to be starting out today with expectations and map trends. So this is actually a topic that you brought up to me, Prodigy, during the course of the week. So you want to kick us off a little bit? I know you gave me some notes on exactly what you were talking about, but go ahead and kick us off a little bit on this topic.
Okay, so just to give like a little bit of history on how this topic kind of came to be. Yesterday I was watching the Korean Weekly, fantastic tournament. Finally is back underway. Day 2 of week 1, season 3. And Ganzi was playing against someone on Frigid Pass. And Frigid Pass, for those of you guys who aren't aware, is the new ESV map from Time Twister. It is a 4-spawn reflection symmetry map, and unlike most reflection symmetry maps, it does not have spawns blocked. You can see it there on the screen. Typically, when you see reflection symmetry maps, they will have block spawns. This has just become a trend within StarCraft 2. Basically because of Blizzard's crappy map making, Metalopolis, Shakuras Plateau, etc., all have really bad rush distances in one position or another. Frigid Pass was designed specifically with that in mind, so that it would be a viable reflection symmetry map without needing to block any spawns. So, blocking spawns, like we've said in the past, is like basically it's a band-aid solution for a bad map design. You just didn't make your map properly. And Ganzi yesterday did a strategy where he went for a blind opening, and he went across the map, built a factory under one of the main bases, lifted into the main base, and like he didn't scout at all. This was completely blind strategy. Right. Under the impression that that it was just forced cross positions, because it was a reflection symmetry map, and most reflection symmetry maps nowadays have at least close positions blocked, making it so that it's a 50-50 on the other side of the map, or it's forced cross positions. And that really, really bothered me, because what that means is, like, his logic is completely sound. That makes perfect sense to expect something like that of a map. But the fact that it's gotten to that point now, that blocked spawns has become such a trend in the map-making community and in StarCraft 2 in general, like, the fact that it's just gone to this point is just bad. It's strictly bad, and that players think it's acceptable to be playing on maps like that. It's just, I disagree with it completely. Like I've said many times on this show now, if you need to block a spawn position on a map, your map was just bad right from the get-go, and it's just bad.
Well, and I think, I mean, what really all started this, I would say, is going back to the Blizzard maps, right? There was a lot of Blizzard maps that had a lot of issues with close spawn positions. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking of when they blocked the close spawns on maps like Shattered Temple. They blocked it on
Lost Temple, Metalopolis.
Lost Temple, Metalopolis, because the rush distances were actually shorter, especially in the case of Metalopolis and I believe Shattered Temple, than Steps of War, which they took out of the map because of the extremely short rush distances. And originally they didn't want to even keep Metalopolis if they got rid of close spawns, because they think 2 spawns was too little. But then they ended up doing it anyways. Then a lot of tournaments forced cross spawns on a lot of maps that had issues with certain spawning locations. So you did indeed get this trend with maps just because of the map pool that we had available out there at the time. That is basically like, okay, minus like a few GSL maps like Tal'Darim, Terminus, around the time of Shattered Temple and stuff were still being used. Aside from some of those GSL maps where you didn't have any blocked spawn locations, and by blocked spawns, of course, he's talking about a particular spawn location where they block the ability to spawn there in a given matchup based on where your opponent spawns. So if you spawn top left on Metalopolis, your opponent's not going to spawn top right, so you can't have close positions. That's what he's talking about by the blocked spawn positions. In case anybody just didn't know what you were talking about there. I mean, that was really what started this trend, was the fact that most of the maps were Blizzard maps at the time. There wasn't a lot of map-making teams back out then, so tournaments started blocking the spawns to try and band-aid the solution. But like you're saying, it really has become a trend. I mean, every tournament I cast for has maps like that where it's forced cross. Normally Antigua's forced cross that I can think of off the top of my head. You're getting a lot of background noise all of a sudden. Normally you get a forced crossed on Antigua. I think they do forced cross on Shattered, or not Shattered, Shakuris. And I think they also were doing forced cross on Metalopolis for a while as well. There's probably some other maps I'm not thinking of, but it is still a trend that, you know, if I'm playing in a tournament, I've got my neutral supply depot so that I don't have to worry about, you know, pylon wall-offs and bunker wall-offs, and then I also have my opponent over in the cross spawn position. So, I mean, what do you think is the answer to this? I mean, obviously you would say just not making bad maps, but even a lot of the new maps, you're still seeing this happen with tournaments. Is this something that's on the tournaments a little bit for constantly forcing the cross positions, or is this something that's on the map designers themselves?
I think there's obviously a lot at play here, like, that has led to this trend becoming what it is. I mean, a big part of it is obviously game design. So, you know, maybe that close rush distance wouldn't be so bad if I couldn't make 4 barracks off one base and run Marines into the other guy's base at like 4 minutes. So that's just one extreme example of, you know, the game design. But we've obviously gone to the point where we know the game design isn't going to change at least until Heart of the Swarm. So we'll just take that completely off the table. Beyond that, there's also a lot of players are very vocal about their opinions on the game. The StarCraft 2 community, compared to Brood War, is a lot less accepting of some of these things. You know, in Brood War, if there was a problem like that, you just kind of sucked it up and dealt with it. And in StarCraft 2, you raise the pitchforks and complain about it until it gets fixed. So it's a lot different. And people are doing that knowing that, you know, there's somebody there who's actually going to listen and make the change or do something about it. Whereas in Brood War, Blizzard is like, nah, we're done balancing the game. It's up to the maps now, and if you guys don't like it, then pick a different map. So there's that. Tournaments have a bottom line that they need to hit, so if they have a map that doesn't have like those close positions blocked and they have a bunch of angry players, those angry players go on streams, podcasts, Twitter, whatever, Reddit. They go and badmouth the tournament. That hurts their brand image, and from somebody who, like, from a business perspective, that's bad all around. So there's no reason to not block the spawn position from that perspective. You know, there's a lot of sides of the coin here, and I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Like I've mentioned time and time again, the main variables that we have control over, especially as map makers, is obviously the maps. So, like, the start and finish for, at least for us, specifically like ESV or like other map makers, just not make bad maps. But also, like, to the tournament organizers, like, don't pick these maps that, you know, have these problems so that this trend kind of dies off, so these trends don't start. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the players like maybe don't be so angry about it when like mutas can get into your base a little bit quicker than on another map. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you had mentioned some other trends that have come up there that actually really, I think, affect map designing from the perspective of the show a lot more than some things like just forcing crossbounds, right? Because obviously that's not going to as much limit your map design. But you're talking about some of the other stuff, trends that Blizzard's been pushing, also like 8 minerals, 2 gas on every map. Every time they add a tournament map into the ladder map pool, any base that's not that, they change to 8 minerals, 2 gas. Then sometimes the tournaments end up even using the ladder editions of the maps. So there's like the free resource based concept that's been out there, which I mean I think to some extent when you're forcing these trends on the maps, right, like whether it's 8 minerals, 2 gas at every base, only using destructible rocks instead of using creep tumors when you talk about a map like Metropolis, not allowing water on maps because players might not get it. You create these trends, right, that you really didn't see in Brood War. I mean, basically a map designer made a map, tried to make it balanced, and that was their map, and if there was a balance issue, they went back to it. But if they didn't have a balance issue, they didn't really putz with it too much. I mean, some maps were even designed to balance against certain players and such forth to help balance the game itself. But, I mean, with Travis and Superman also here, I mean, like, is there anything else that you think like this could potentially cause negatively for you as map designers?
I don't know. Let me think. Travis, go ahead.
I don't know.
People are becoming too lazy, I think.
Yeah.
With the difference in the maps. Like, close position can be very interesting if the distance is long enough between the two networks, because it gives a totally different dynamic on the map in comparison to close air or close position. The battles will happen differently because they will be closer to each other, like in the third and fourth. So they can have more opportunity to be aggressive. They maybe create more lower scale battles, maybe. And it's important to give really a big defender's advantage in this close position, because otherwise the attacker can just run through the space and just attack you without any difficulties.
Well, and doesn't that kind of go back to what Prodigy was saying about maybe if you have to close off those positions that the map wasn't really inherently designed very well? Because you were saying, like, you know, if you're in close positions, you have to have a good defender's advantage. So if you have close positions possible, and there's not a good defender's advantage, with that being a potentiality, is that maybe on the map designers a little bit more to not make that a problem? Or is it something where it's acceptable to just be like, well, the map's alright in cross positions, so we're just going to use it in cross positions instead of fixing the issue that it has in close positions?
See, I've talked about this before, and like there's a lot of reasons why StarCraft, like Brood War and StarCraft 2, is just strictly better than all of the RTSs that exist, and it's because of the asymmetry and the adaptation that you have to deal with. So you have to learn different matchups. Protoss has to learn PvP, PvZ, and PvT. And then you have to be able to adapt to different strategies, different play styles. You have to be able to have good mechanics, etc. And, like, as far as I'm concerned, the better player in, like, any competitive situation is one that can execute like all different forms of the game better. So, you know, adaptation, just execution, whatever the game plan was, mechanics, etc. And if you take out that adaptation element, so like if you spawn close positions and you don't adapt your strategy, which was like go 3 hatch before you make a roach warren, and then you die to a rush, you complain about it and you get forced cross position so you can do that. That's just not acceptable. And I think that's maybe an extreme example, but it's a big part of like why that trend has kind of started. Where was I going with that?
No, I think I see where you're going with it, because you're not only just talking about like how this can limit you as map designers, you're talking about how in some ways it limits the creativity of play, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I'm one of the first people to say that. Anytime I spawn close positions on metal, I was face palming, because I was like, oh, if it's a Terran player, I'm probably just gonna die to a 2-Rax bunker rush because I can't hold it. Like, you can, but it's extremely, extremely difficult for the Zerg player. You have to out-micro the Terran player and then some, right? Because essentially they could potentially just win with it without really microing at all. They could basically A-move at you, and you'd have to then micro everything really well to not lose drones, pull low drones back to your mineral lines and stuff like that, try and get up a spine crawler in time before the bunkers are finishing. Like, there was a whole bunch of, like, there was a lot of downsides to it, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think what you're saying is while maybe that's not good, because I don't think you're a proponent of that's a good situation.
That's just dumb.
You're saying on a properly designed map, it's something players shouldn't necessarily complain about, because if they're limiting the type of play to, oh, I want to play like this, if a map doesn't let me play like this, then obviously it's a bad map. Your argument would be that maybe it's not a bad map, but maybe this is an element of the game that needs to be there. I mean, players complain that StarCraft 2 a lot of times is too easy compared to Brood War. When you take elements out like spawn positions, where you're forcing spawn positions, thus dumbing down the maps, I mean, just making the game easier. Right,
exactly.
You're making it easier. So it's like, do you really want the game to be easier, or do you actually want the game to be more difficult? Because like an argument like what you're talking about, where a player would come out and say, oh, this close spawns is stupid, now I have to play differently, would actually be an argument that would counter any argument of them saying, oh, this game's too easy, it needs to be harder. It's like, well, now you just made the game easier. And I'm sure some players would come back and say, no, it's just imbalanced, but I mean, is that really true so long as the map's designed properly, right? I mean, if the map's designed properly, it shouldn't be a balance issue. It should be a playstyle issue.
Yeah.
If it's a proper map.
If it's a proper map. And I mean, obviously, this is a lot of theory crafting, but a lot of the discussion of that revolves around map making is like a lot of theory crafting, a lot of, I guess, like philosophical debates about like how you want to be able to deploy some of your ideas and stuff like that. Which is like one of the great reasons why this show exists. But like just to build on that point, like relatively speaking, when you use a map like, say, Shakura's Plateau, and then you force cross positions on it, it's no longer a 4-player map. I mean, at that point, it's basically a 2-spawn map, right? So it's effectively, you know, it's the same idea as Cloud Kingdom or Ohana, right?
Right.
So now look at, like, compare it inherently to a map like Ohana or Cloud Kingdom, and then you just go like, this map is garbage.
Right. I'm actually bringing Shakura's up on the screen right now.
It's just, like, it's not a very good map that way, and, like, because of the symmetry, like, you're throwing away a lot of potential creativity. Like, if you're forcing cross positions, then, like, 2 quadrants of the map you can now play with, and you're just choosing not to. So, like, you could be doing a lot more with the map, and you're just simply not. So, like, again, I come back to that opportunity cost of, you know, playing, like, having 2 great players play on a bad map versus having 2 players play on a good map. You know, you're obviously going to get a better game out of the good map, right? So, or theoretically speaking.
Well, in a lot of games I've seen played on Shakura's, I mean, if you have people spawning at cross positions, you almost always get the map cut on this diagonal 9 times out of 10, I'd say.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not to say that there's not bad game, or there's not, like, every game on Shakura's is bad, but you could get better games off of a better design map. is what I guess I'm
Right.
trying to say.
Yeah, basically, a lot of us try and implement a lot of creativity in our StarCraft 2 maps, and so when it doesn't work close spawn, we are essentially take me to your leader.
Your mic farts whenever you talk right now. Like whenever you try to run. I think it's okay now. I think you might just sound like you ran over the cable a few too many times. Yeah, it's fine.
He's sitting there in his room on his chair, and he's like, I'm gonna saw through this cable before I'm done. Oh, now my chair went down.
God, this really good. No, but for real though, we want to have a lot of creativity in the game, and when we can't enable close spawn, that's removing a lot of the dynamics. And it's when you force cross spawn or just cross positions, you're basically putting a crutch on the map just to make it work. When you shouldn't need it to make the map work. If you honestly have to enable cross spawn, or I would say cross spawn only. If it's disabling close spawns, then that's okay. But if it's like forced diagonal spawn, that's probably the worst.
Yeah.
If you have to get to that point, then the map is just garbage. Because if you have to honestly fix it from that, you have to completely redesign the map or make it bigger than a standard 4-player map.
Yeah.
Or, as Prodigy said earlier, what I was actually going to mention, it essentially just becomes a 2-player map, and it's like, well, you might as well just go play a 2-player map.
Right.
Or just make 2-player maps larger than they currently are, because even on most 2-player maps, people still think they're garbage. So it's like, okay, so current 2-player maps are garbage, and then there's a lot of dynamics missing or that get erased from a 4-player cross-spawn position map. So I mean, as a map maker, you have to kind of find a balance, like, well, how big does a 2-player map have to be now? And where exactly do the spawns go, and how far does the rush distance have to be? So I think I think disabling close spawn it's okay, but forcing cross spawn like on Antigua is just not the right way to do it, because, like I said earlier, that's just a crutch just to get the map to work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree completely.
We definitely see it a lot more often on Blizzard maps than we do see it on some of the tournament-style maps. You see it a lot less often. I mean, you're starting to see more of a trending. I'd say in some of the major tournaments that actually do push new maps, like GSL, for instance. You're starting to see more 2-player maps that are larger. Some may be a little bit too large, such as Calm Before the Storm was, but you're starting to see larger 2-player maps. I think is becoming more of the trend. And the question is that really good that you're seeing larger 2-player maps? Because I think there is an element you do open up, right, with the 2-player only maps, which is you open up the play style of, okay, if most of my maps are 2-player maps, if I'm a Terran player, my strategy every game can be 2 proxy rack bunker rush, and I can do that because I know exactly where my opponent is. Versus, say, if you're on Tal'Darim, if you're going to 2-rack bunker rush, normally you see players drop the bunkers in the dead center of the map, which is a little bit dangerous because now it's more likely they're going to get scouted by your opponent if they ever cross the center of the map, which is definitely possible while they're scouting. And it makes it more difficult because now you have to find them, right? Because if you don't find them in one of your first couple of scouts, now it's not going to work because you're not going to get there in time. If it was like against, say, a Zerg player, they're going to have their expansion hatchery come up, they're going to have time to throw down a spine crawler, and by the time you even start building a barracks, it's kind of fruitless at that point. So you kind of pigeonhole playstyles in some way. Well, not pigeonhole, but you make some playstyles much, much more effective when you force cross spawns and such forth, I think, as well.
Yeah, I want to touch up on that because I recently had a game at the end of last season. It was a Zerg versus Zerg match on Antigua, and but he rolled random. And so in that case, it's like, oh, well, shoot, I better scout on 8 or 9 drones, you know? And so I do that, and I scout his base last on Antigua, which is just unlucky.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I got there, he had 8 Zerglings on the way to my base, and I just couldn't hold it off in time.
That's random.
I mean, it's just... okay, but going back to what we were talking about, is cross-spawn fair now? Or is luck an okay thing to have in StarCraft 2 because of spawn locations? I mean, like, where do you draw the line on that?
I think, responding specifically to that scenario, like, the same thing existed in Brood War, and, like, back then, people just attributed, like, the guy was playing random. That's, like, the main purpose of random in situations like that is because you can get away with a lot more. Like, you don't know if I'm Terran Protoss or Zerg, so you don't know if I'm 6-pooling you, 2-gating you, or proxy barracksing you, right? And, like, random, there is definitely a lot of luck, but the trade-off for that is that the random player now has to learn 9 matchups instead of 3, so...
Well...
I mean, back in Brood War, everybody thought that was okay, but nowadays, like, you bring up that argument, and there's definitely something to be said for it, don't get me wrong, but I think, again, like, maybe a big better rush distance in that particular position is probably helpful, and I think that might be one of the problems with Antigua specifically, but...
Yeah, because I definitely had just straight-up ZVZ matchups on Antigua Shipyard. And I do a fairly conservative opening on those maps especially. I'll either 11 overpool or I'll 14-13, just because if he is that close ground and that Overlord does make it to my base or bumps into my Overlord or something and he is 6-pooling, he's going to get to my base so quickly that I'm going to have a real tough time holding, right? So even if it's not random player, I think there is some issues you can run into, especially with close spawns on those maps. But if you do have to scout, there is that luck factor that gets added into it, which of course pro players who their livelihood is depending on whether they win or lose games obviously don't want to rely on luck, right? Because if you're especially in a tournament like an MLG or something and you go up against a guy and say he's going to 6-pool you 2 games or at least the first game, and you hatch first, right, in a ZVZ against like some random gold level player playing like Nesty or something, and he 6-pools and pulls all but like 2 of his droids, kills Nesty the first game because Nesty scouted him last. The second game, Nesty does a more conservative opening. It's a 4-spawn map, and he hatches first, and now Nesty's behind, and then loses the game again. Like, I think there's some elements that players dislike about that. So that's, I think, might be part of the reason why you do get these more pushes towards like either big 2-player maps or forced cross because you don't want those random elements to be as effective. But does that really speak volumes towards there being a problem with map design and there needing to be forced cross spawns, or would I wonder if that actually speaks to issues with rushes just maybe being too powerful in the game?
I think I can make the argument that you just simply didn't adapt to the matchup in that situation. So, like, regardless of the map, if you died to an early rush because you did a different build, maybe you weren't playing safe enough. I mean, obviously on the ladder, there's a lot less metagaming you can do than you can in a competition. So, you know, by metagame, I mean, like, oh, I'm playing Idra. He's probably not going to cheese me because he just doesn't cheese all that often. So, you know, on the ladder, you're playing against somebody who's completely random. I find that, like, a lot of more successful ladder players will play a lot more conservatively. Like, they won't go, it's like, oh, it's EVZ. Well, I'll just go for a nice old 14-pool, and I won't die to a 6-pool because, well, he's just not going to 6-pool me. So, I mean, that's a bit of an arrogant example, but, again, you have to keep in mind adaptability in situations like that. I mean, it's a very narrow line to cross, I think.
It's much easier to adapt on a map like Tal'Darim Maltar because the rush distances are way, way, way bigger. Where Antigua is just as big as, or even smaller than Cloud Kingdom, I think. So, I think map size is really more what matters. Not just necessarily adapting, because there are just certain things you just cannot quickly adapt to quick enough. So.
Well, when I say adapting, I mean like adapting right from the get-go. So, like if you're playing a ZVZ on Antigua Shipyard and you do the same build you do on Tal'Darim and you die to a sick pool, then I don't know how much of that's the map's fault, right?
Debatable.
Yeah, exactly. It's debatable.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like one of those topics that can really go back and forth when you think about it, because from a player's point of view, like...
anything they die to is bad.
Well,
so.
any element... Well, I think it depends, right? Because obviously if they play a bad game, they'll just say I played really bad and he played really well and I lost. But especially when you talk about different types of cheesy things, whether it be a Protoss going 17 Nexus with no Forge, or because he was on Tal'Darim. I think there was an example of that, when was it? When Stefano played, was it in Nori? No, maybe. I'm trying to remember, but I think it was at MLG Columbus, I think. And he played a Protoss on, and they picked Tal'Darim as the map. The Protoss goes 17 Nexus into a Forge, like this absolutely greedy build that Stefano ends up not being able to punish because they're on Tal'Darim. And ends up killing Stefano because all of his timings are sped up, right? Because by taking that really greedy Nexus, his timings hit a little bit sooner, and then Stefano wasn't ready for it, and he kills Stefano. But that wouldn't have probably been possible on a map where it was a two-player map, right? Because Stefano's going to get there in time. He can delay him from dropping a 17 Nexus. He knows he's dropping a 17 Nexus right away, so he can react if he wants to and roach rush him or something. But all those options go out the window when you've got to scout a lot of spawn positions on a fairly large map like a Tal'Darim, and you scout him, say, last. And now the Nexus is already going up. He's already put down the Forge, and by the time you can actually react to it and try and pressure him and punish him, it's too late, because he's going to have cannons up, he's going to be walled off, and now you're just kind of in a position where you have to suck it up and deal with the fact that you're going to be worlds behind, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think to some elements there's justification in the players saying, I don't want that in here because that's random. That's out of my control. If I get lucky and scout him right away, I can punish him and he dies. If I don't get lucky, he's ahead, and I might die as a result of it. And players don't like that, right? Especially when we're talking about, oh, there's $50,000 on the line, and oh, look, he just lost because he got unlucky 2 games in a row, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not necessarily what you want players to have to deal with, and I think as fans, you're not going to really like that much either. So I think there is some of that does play into this, but the question I think really then becomes, if that's the case, how do you do, like, say, 4 spawn maps without there being that random factor into the map? Can you do that and not have random things really punish players? Or is it something where you either have to make a choice as a tournament organizer, say you're picking maps, or as a map designer that, well, I'm going to make a 4 spawn position map. The players are going to just have to deal with the fact that there's a random element, but maybe that's a good thing because it's going to require them to think on their toes more. I don't know.
Well, just to quickly touch on that point, I don't want to continue beating this horse to death too much. I mean, in Brood War, like the way map pools were designed and stuff like that, like the 4-player map in the map pool existed to show players like more safer styles, specifically because, or like whether they were like ready to just completely roll the dice. And the reason for that was, like, obviously, because on a 4-player map, there's a lot more misinformation that you can deal with. There's, like you said, that random factor where, like, if I go and try to proxy barracks, like, outside of somebody's base and he's not there, then I die. So, like, again, being an extreme example, but, you know, if somebody goes 6 pool and he just manages to hit you first and you die to it, like, that's a dice roll. And, like, in a $50,000 tournament, if you win because of that, then, like, you know, you got lucky. Yeah. And you know that sucks, but that's part of StarCraft, and it has been like literally since day one. And I don't think that something like that is really going to be something that goes anywhere. Now, like in a situation where like you can consistently get a free win by rolling the dice, then maybe there's like, you know, some statistical trends there, something like that. That, you know, maybe the rush isn't so small that like no matter what happens, like even if I get it wrong the first time, I can still kill you in the second spot. So, you know, then the map is bad. But the 4-player map served to show some more of that like pre-game metagame style and that adaptability. I don't know why I keep emphasizing the wrong syllable. But and then like the 2-player map was just be like you can walk into that with like your pre-planned out metagame strategy and like you can just straight execute it. You don't have to worry about rush or like different spawn positions and stuff like that. Like they serve different purposes within a match, and I don't want to see that go away by blocking spawn positions.
Yeah, I mean you can't remove luck and you can't fix luck. That's why it's called luck.
Mm-hmm.
So some things are just going to happen, and luck is based on how you roll the dice and the decisions that you make. It's just something that's always going to be there, as Prodigy said. So
yeah,
you know, on a map like Metalopolis, close spawn would definitely have to be disabled for very, very obvious reasons, because consistently you would see 2 racks or 6 pool or 2 gate pressure and all that kind of jazz. And that is a perfect example of why a close spawn should be disabled. But you know, where MLG uses cross spawn only Antigua, I don't know. I don't think it's, based on my observation, I haven't seen any consistent professional play where people on close spawn on Antigua would be cheesing. Like, I don't know. It's just,
well, it becomes that
debatable.
dice roll build, right? Because it's what you used to see on Metalopolis in tournaments before they disable close spawn in tournaments. Somebody would decide they're going to go 2 racks, they'd scout close spawn first, and if they got close spawn, it was a free win. If they didn't, they were going to have to play the game out, and they'd immediately do something to abort out of it. Like Terran players a lot of times would just build a command center and not push because they were cross spawns and they didn't think it was going to work. But if it did happen, they had already started the build, so then they just won the game because it was almost impossible for the Zerg player to hold. So I think maybe that relates more towards just the fact that Metalopolis had a real issue with close spawns. Yeah. But I think you guys made some good points about that. So long as you make the map properly, as Prodigy is always going to be preaching to people, it shouldn't be as big of a deal, and a lot of those random factors shouldn't be as problematic. I mean, even if in this case of a 6 pulls, I'm thinking about this more. There is an inherent risk there, because if he doesn't find you right away, he's going to be way behind. So there's an inherent risk there in that dice roll to try and get the luck win, right? You scout close spawns, he's not there. You pick one of the other 2 spawns and you go because you have to. If you don't hit the right place, or if it's cross spawns and it's just too far, you could just lose the game as a result. So you're kind of 50-50 dice rolling either way. So I mean, and that's not necessarily a bad thing to have in the game.
Distance is a pretty big thing, because you also have to take into account, if you're scouting him and he's moving out, can you get units up in time? Like, as a Zerg player, on close spawn Metalopolis, if I saw him go 2 racks, and he had the barracks even at his own base, like, I'm like, oh crap, spam Z. But more than half of them don't even come out while he's in the middle of attacking my natural. Yeah. It's just like, you need to have a little bit of time to, get those reinforcements out. And, I mean, even if you're scouting his front, like, and you still can't do it, it's just not good.
Yeah, that in my opinion is just like, it's a perfect example of a map that is just like bad right from the get-go and should basically be axed and or redesigned. So, and when I say redesigned, I don't mean apply a band-aid solution. So like Metropolis, a little bit better. I think close positions on that map probably still pretty bad, but
well, Metropolis,
like,
you can't
do something better about it.
That's another disabled positions map.
Yeah, they've disabled it like right out of the get-go, and I mean, again, a band-aid solution to what I feel is just like bad map design. Like I'm sure that if you rejiggered some things around a little bit, you could probably do a better job. That being said, it's like a huge pain in the ass because he did everything on a 45-degree angle of symmetry. So, like, I've done it before, and like making slight adjustments is a nightmare. So we won't get too far into that, though.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll wrap up the talk on this topic for now. we'll move on to our next topic. But before we do, we're going to take a really quick break, guys. I'm going to lift my chair back up as I'm slowly sinking down here. And then when we come back, guys, we're going to actually lead in, this topic will lead in nicely to our next topic, which is going to be breaking down what specifically makes a good map or a bad map, and specifically the features on the map, going in depth a little bit about what makes a map good versus what makes a map bad, whether it be the size of the map, the layout of the map, attributes that get thrown into the map due to balance things. So we're going to be talking about that, guys, in just 1 second, so stay tuned, more mappers, and we will be right back in just a second. Alright everyone, hello and welcome back to Mappers Episode 5. We are done with our first topic, so we're going to cross that off the list, and we're going to be moving on to what makes a good map or a bad map, and specifically the features on those maps, going in depth a little bit about what is good versus bad. We're going to be starting with sizes of maps, so let's discuss a little bit. We'll just start out the very base of the map, the thing that's really going to set it off at the first. What is right for size of the map? What's bad, what's good? I gave you guys some examples, you know, whether it's too large, too small, too narrow, too wide, too much land versus not enough land. That's that whole island versus non-island map, or even some maps where like there's a lot of airspace and not a whole lot of ground space. So what of these features do you guys think matters the most when it comes to talking about sizes of a map?
Proportion of base layouts, by far. At least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like,
Okay, for example, Steps of War. The map size itself is actually fairly fine. But if you look at the naturals, like, it's like you can throw a baseball from one to the other.
yeah.
You're bringing that
It's
up
like
right now.
they're not just close, but they're like almost in the center of the map, and that's just bad. Like the map size itself is good. It's just the naturals are horribly placed.
Yeah, a map is like, you have to think of it as like the sum of all of its parts together, right? It's not like one feature alone makes it good and then everything else can simply be overlooked. So, like, Steps of War is definitely a great example. If you remember playing on Steps of War, I think you'll recall that the main base is literally, it's massive. It's so big. Like, if you run out of space in that main base, then either your macro is terrible and you're like, oh god, I have 7,500 resources, I better throw down like 40 factories right now. Or you can't place buildings at all and you're just... Like, the only way you fill that base up is if you're bad. Is basically what I'm getting at. Like, main bases do not need to be that big.
Right.
Nor do they need to be in that direction. So, like, if I were to, like, see a map like this on the map-making forum, if you look at where the main base is, to the left of it on the top or the right of it on the bottom, there's a huge chunk of void airspace there. Why does the rampant and the natural have to be there? Why does the natural have to be there? Why don't you move the natural back into that void space a little bit, excuse me, and then shift everything else over a little bit, like use the space a little bit more efficiently. Having proper proportions is like the proper term here that I guess we'd be getting at. And then, like, the natural problem there would be a lot better. It would. I can't say for sure whether it would be entirely fixed just looking at some drawings here on the screen, but you know, it would help the map a lot amongst other things. I mean, obviously you have to deal with balance concerns. Like, if you have it exactly like where it is now, then the gold would have to get moved. Otherwise, you could just like blink over the edge and be in the natural, which would be dumb. But you know, that's just one example of many of how, like, better proportions can make a map, like, significantly better.
Yeah,
Right.
and touching up on what Prodigy said about how the mains are ginormous, even the naturals actually have a little bit too much room, because if you have a large main, you need a small natural. If you have a medium-sized main, you need a medium natural, and a small main, you can have a much bigger natural for that production. But because you have such a huge main, you don't need all that space in your natural. That's just helping out Protoss and Terran even more.
And about the map size, the map size itself doesn't matter that much. It's more like how you use that space. Like Reggie said, it's better to place the natural in the void space near the map border, because you would use the space of all the map more efficiently, and you can do more things. And the resistance would be already fine.
So now, I actually had another question, because there's another aspect of this that I was looking at. Because there's definitely been some maps, too, besides just looking at the map size itself. I believe it was Crevasse I was using the example of. Because this kind of goes in a different direction than a map like Steps of War. It was like Steps of War was... Or not Crevasse. I'm thinking of a different map. Crossfire, I think, was the map I was actually thinking of. Where you ended up seeing this map start to kind of make its way out of map pools to a large extent. I think GSL and some other maps have still been using it on and off, but for a large part, it's made a diminishment, I guess I'd say, in how often you see this map actually come up in tournament play. And a lot of it was because a lot of players, and I'm actually going to bring it up on the screen now, were complaining about the actual the narrowness of the map, right? it becomes very choky when it becomes very narrow like this. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how do you guys feel about this? I mean, does a map need to be boxy like Shakira's? Or is there, like, actually a happy ground where you can maybe narrow up the map a little bit, but you just can't maybe get this extreme?
I think
I
Subaru Man has, like, he's got this on lock. He's the man to ask about this.
Yeah. Well, what you have to think with narrowness is where you want to defend. You always want to place your army behind the choke, and it's better to have large areas or medium-sized areas behind the choke, like on below ground areas on the Clock Kingdom. It's not large or not small,
Right.
but on the Crossfire, uh, it's really more choked, and you can't attack directly the opponent army, because you will always run into a choke, and you will have always a bad engagement. So the center of the map isn't that big, so you can often move your own army really close to the opponent army and not having to engage it because it would be a mistake. So what I want to try to do with chokes is to try to split armies a little bit, like to do at least flanks on the opponent's death ball,
Mm-hmm.
or to try to give some area control, like the on the Crossfire, the plateau with Xanaga Tower is really good for area control because it's a forward position, but it allows you to defend all of the bases behind you, like the one in the corners. And I think putting giving the ability to to players to place their army in a forward position, I think it's a good thing because it makes the armies closer, so you can have more possibilities to engage, or to at least to be aggressive. Like you can split a small group of units to harass a base from that position, or you can also defend it, like splitting like half of your army to deal with this harassment.
Yeah, it's not about just running death balls everywhere and having enough room to just run your death ball around and not have to worry about anything. There should, like chokes and stuff like that. There's you can have more depth with that if it's like the map lends itself to it. So if there's a giant open field, I have no reason to break my death ball up.
Right.
But you know, if there's chokes and stuff like that, then maybe I want to split half my army up so that I can get it around to the other side, so I don't have to run it through a choke and get blown up by siege tanks.
Yeah, the problem with Crossfire is I really like the concept. I like maps that are like vertically stretched out like that. I think we need more of those types of maps. I just think that if you were to draw a line horizontally, cutting through each watchtower, everything in between that is just poorly designed. I mean, the towers cover everything, every path, so you're gonna have to go through a tower regardless. And there are just so many different little avenues that it's so easy to get caught out of position. Like, he could be running into your natural, and you could be like in the top right pathway in the middle, and that's a long run to get back to your natural to reinforce it. Whereas, you know, you can, on a lot of other maps, it's like you can just run straight back to it. So I think that it's a unique map. It's just the whole center is just kind of poorly designed, I think. But yeah, it's definitely what these guys were saying. You can't just go screaming through there with a death ball. It's really more about like splitting it up and a lot of flanking and things like that. So
yeah, having more of a tactical engagement than just death balls.
Well, that is something that, at least some extent, right, that Blizzard's been trying to address is the whole death ball mentality, right? Like, they've been saying a lot, like, as they move towards Heart of the Swarm, they want to address some of the issues. They don't want to add units that go into the death ball because they've realized that, while terrible damage might be fun in some ways, when you have death ball versus death ball, terrible damage becomes whoever's death ball is better wins. So, like, for instance, it might not be easy for a Protoss player to max out, but typically if a Protoss player can max out, they have probably, at this point in the game, one of the strongest death balls in the game. It's very difficult for Terran or Zerg to deal with that maxed out Protoss ball of units. You know, when they've got, depending on the types of compositions, but when they've got some odd mix of Colossus, some gateway units with force fields, in the case of sometimes the PVZ matchup, there might be some Void Rays or something thrown in. It's very difficult for the opponent to deal with that ball because you have to have the absolute perfect engagement to engage it. Really, that ball can just move across the map.
Yeah.
So,
while I think positional play is actually really important, and it's actually a very good feature, I think Crossfire overemphasizes it to a point where positional play is just wrong. All you have to do is put a couple sensor towers or a couple overlords along the borders, and then take control of your tower, and then there you go. You just have
I think
complete control of half of your map.
The Xel'Naga towers on that map are what really ruin it. It's a port of Peaks of Beakdu, for those of you guys who aren't aware. Peaks of Beakdu, also being a Brood War map, very similar. But the high ground mechanic in Brood War worked a lot differently, so controlling those high ground pods was arguably more important because attacking up them was a lot worse in some situations. StarCraft 2 is a little different because you can get chopped in half by force fields and stuff like that, or get splashed by tanks because of the extra pathing. But we won't talk too much about that. But the force field, the Xel'Naga towers on this map, they're positioned in such a way that once you have them, you're not going to lose them. Like, if I park my army next to one of those Xel'Naga towers on Crossfire, it's going to be pretty hard for you to run your army and just kick me off. Like, it really just isn't going to happen. So what it becomes is, like, well, just, you know, sit on the Xel'Naga tower. You can't really get hit by ground, so now you just have to watch the air, and boom, you have half the map. And I don't think that's a great way to be using Xel'Naga towers. I think, like, the way I use them on Vicious is, like, I use them in a similar way where they're incredibly powerful and you can pretty much see all of the ground attack tasks, but they're a lot more vulnerable. And I think if you're going to make the Xel'Naga tower very powerful like that, then they need to be in an exposed and very vulnerable position, open to flanks and, you know, a lot of different ways to get booted off that Xel'Naga tower, so that actually holding down that terrain is a lot more challenging and there's a lot more depth to it than just park your army next to it and you're good.
So even potentially something like moving the Xel'Naga towers from where they are kind of in these locations just down to the low ground, but basically in the same location, could have made a world of difference for a map like this, is what you're saying.
In some ways, yeah. I think that would, like, if we as a team were looking at this map, like we had it on the drawing board, nobody had ever seen it before, and we put the towers there, somebody would probably be like, yeah, you should try them on the low ground. I could definitely see that happening. Whether that is, like, 100% the best position on that map, or whether they should exist on the map at all, is another another item of debate that, you know, me and the map team could sit and Skype and talk about for hours and hours on end. So
spitball it.
Yeah.
Alright, well, let's keep the discussion moving on. So we were talking a little bit about size of maps, narrow versus wide, just large versus small. Looked at Steps of War, Crossfire a little bit as maybe some examples of some of the ways you maybe don't want to go. now let's actually move into the actual layouts of the map. You know, what really entails a proper main, what entails a proper natural, you know, where do you put those thirds and fourths, you know, what's too cramped, what's too spread out, where do you put those Zelnaga towers that you guys have been talking about, especially with Crossfire. So let's talk a little bit about the layout and get you guys' thoughts on what either will make or break a map, just based on the layout of the map.
Well, I think it's not so much about what will make the map, but what will break the map. I mean, a big part of what the Icy Cup map making team did that like really led to the ESV mapping team like pick up a lot of momentum was like we were doing the Icy Cup map series and stuff. A lot of the maps we were doing were very, very experimental compared to like what we have now. You know, Test Bug is like a great example of that, and like it shows us like, okay, so now we know that we can't have a rush distance that's 22 seconds. I'm not speaking for like the Icy Cup map making team, but like you can look at Steps of War. I know the ramp to ramp is 22 seconds. So if I make a map that has a 22-second ramp to ramp distance, then I know the map is just going to be broken right from the get-go, and I need to address that. Or you know, if the natural has an entrance that's too wide, then it's probably bad. Or if it has you know, a high ground next to it, then it's probably going to have a problem, etc. And like, there's like we have a list of things that we know that if we do will like lead to chaos and disaster, and that we can avoid. And then, like by not doing that list of things, then you can start to have what we hope to be a good map. And then like you kind of just mix it up from there. And you know, as time goes on, we'll realize that like, oh well, this new feature that we added in still doesn't work. So that doesn't answer like some of the specific things, but like
right.
You know, a lot of the Blizzard maps give like a really good starting point. So like I said, that really short ramp to ramp distance from like the main ramps is bad, or having the exposed natural or the really close natural expansions like Steps of War did is just bad. The cliffs over Lost Temple are just bad, and like if you do any of those things on your map, the map is just not going to work right from the get-go.
Yeah. While it's important to know that okay, this is what can break the map, you know, someone might know like, well, someone might ask like, well, where do I put the bases? Like, where do I put my natural? Do I put it on this side, or in the back, or in the front? Like, that boils down to how you design the center. If you take a look at Zelnaga Caverns, like, the rush distance is fairly short nowadays, but back then it worked because you had this huge crater in the middle, which altered that rush distance, and you had to go around it just to get to your person's natural. And that design feature solely is what made it work, is what made the position of the natural work. That is something that you have to keep in mind. For anyone who designs a map, if base layout can depend solely on how you design the center of the map.
I think that's like a really good point to make.
Because, like, you know, a lot of people will be like, well, I mean, there's some mappers who start with the center of the map, and then others who start with the mains and then naturals and third, and then they'll reflect it or mirror it or whatever, and then they'll try and work from there. You can do either one. It's just you have to keep in mind that wherever your bases are, if you're going to make the naturals closer, like Steps of War, for example, then you need to really become creative with the center of the map to make sure that that distance is fair.
Yeah, I agree completely. A long time ago, when we were still IC Cup TV and the IC Cup map making team, we did the IMS Invitational with Startail, and this was like right around when GSL first started and stuff like that. The major leagues had yet to pick up any of our maps, let alone like community maps and stuff like that. And a lot of the players, when we got feedback from the Startail guys, like one of the things that they commented on was like, we really like these maps because they have a good center design, and then the expansions are just kind of laid around the outside of it. So the center plays a really big role in that it's like one of the main avenues to get to the expansions on the outer rim. I know like they specifically referenced Test Bug a lot in this particular interview about how like Test Bug had, at that point it was before like the two changes that like choked up the middle quite a bit, but they really liked how the middle played a significant role in how like the outer expansions worked.
Yeah. What was I gonna say?
Farty Mike.
He was going to say.
Okay.
Just jiggle
Maybe
the
just
cable
jiggle the
around a little
cable,
bit.
yeah. Jiggle the cable a little bit, maybe, so we can hear you.
Okay. Is it okay now?
No.
Nope.
No.
No. No, it's definitely not okay. So going back to layout, I'm gonna ask Prodigy and Super Roommate a question while you fix your farty mic. What do you guys think about, because this going kind of back to your trends and also going back to layout design. It's become quite common now that almost every map is designed so that, for instance, in the PvZ matchup, Protoss can forge fast expand, so that Terran can wall off with, like, you know, a bunker into barracks, etc., etc. Is this something that you need to have on the layout of the map? Is this just like one of those established trends that are actually a good trend, maybe? Or is this maybe something that even you don't necessarily have to have on the map as far as your layouts go?
I think it's part of it is stylistic. Like it's, you know, you can have a map that has like a slightly more vulnerable natural expansion and won't be like completely bad. Again, factoring in things like rush distance and proximity to other features of the map that are important. But like strictly speaking, like Shattered Temple's natural expansion was pretty defensible. But like by my standards, I prefer to have a more choked natural expansion on my map so that players can, like, they're not going to die to a roach all in because they couldn't like get that third gateway down because the natural is just a little bit bigger. And like I generally prefer to have the natural expansion be on the safer side, strictly because like the amount of games that I've played, that I've watched, that I've seen where like something just strictly lame happens to the natural expansion that I see just like go right down the shitter it's kind of disappointing. So, you know, the 3 pylon block is a perfect example of this, where like something stupid happens to the natural expansion and the game is, throw it out the window. It's the rest of the game is silly. Or like cannons and like behind the natural expansion where they're like in a spot that's like really hard to deal with. Or the natural expansion's like ramp is, or the choke is too wide and you can't FFE, and then, or you can't even take the expansion without it getting busted. Like stuff like that, all of it is just bad. And I think, I guess you could say it's a trend that I think that it's one that I actually do agree with.
For me, it's to promote macro games.
Yeah.
It's mostly it's my main reason, and that's it.
Yeah. Don't like, oh, the natural expansion is really vulnerable, I can roach all in every game. Like, that's not fun.
Currents.
Yeah. That's a perfect example of it.
Am I still farting?
No, you're good now.
No.
Am I still farting?
You have permission. You have permission to talk again.
Your head is officially out of your ass.
This is not a fart gag show, Travis. I know what you're doing. And there'll be people coming to your house tomorrow.
No, I wanted to touch up real quick about the center of the map. A lot of map makers, I feel, they really fall into a trap where they... I can't get over that. Okay, they really fall into a trap where they'll lay out their bases, and then they're like, okay, now I'm just going to be creative with the center of the map, and just throw a bunch of weird, like, high ground everywhere and everything like that. It's not just being creative. I mean, if you even look at Shattered Temple, even though it's wide open, if you look closely at it, the little ditches in the ground actually slightly alter the rush distance. Because if you were to like just select your units in the early game and just A-move to the cross spawn, they will slightly have to take a few steps to the left, going upward, and then go back into the center, and then back, you know, into the enemy's natural. So it actually does something like that. It's not just a feature, it does that for that purpose. And also at the same time trying to utilize chokes. The way centers of the maps are designed is for that reason first and foremost. After that, then you can start adding everything. So, and that also goes with how the ramps are positioned. You know, if you having your natural at 12 o'clock and his natural at 6, you don't want ramps that go vertical so you can go in a straight line. You want them diagonal so that it'll alter it by just a few more seconds. So, just little stuff like that.
So
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I think, like, just to build on that, like, one of the things that we've also figured out as a map making team, and I think the majority of the map making team, like at least the map making community, at least the experienced ones, have figured out is like just straight attack paths from one base to another with like really just not much in between. Like you have a straight beeline from one natural to another is bad. So just like another one of the things that we've all figured out is just something that you don't want to have on your map.
And like, let's say I have a little high ground pod right in the center of my map. That is workable, but consider how your 3rd, 4th, 5th, and even 6th base can be laid out. If it's like a big concave of bases, you're probably going to want to extend that high ground all the way through the center so that it keeps those bases more separate.
Yeah.
Because if you have your 6th base and you're like 10 seconds rush distance from his main or his natural, that's bad. You want to find a way to block that or alter that somehow. That's why the middle of the maps are designed the way they are. Silence.
That's all right.
Silence of agreement.
We're gonna start wrapping this topic up a little bit so that we have some time for our Q&A. But I want to finish off this topic by looking at the ideas of you're looking at the different sizes of the map, what's kind of good, what's kind of bad. You're looking at the layout. Is there anything in specific where you specifically are going to do certain things, whether it's layout, size of map, or whatever, just 100% relation to balance on the map? I think that's going back to the thing like allowing, like you said, you like those narrower chokes out of the natural so that walling off is possible. Is there going to be any specific things that you're going to definitely avoid, not because the map's not going to work, but because there's existing balance issues that maybe if the game changes a little bit down the road, you might go back and use some of those ideas, but maybe right now you don't end up using them because of the way the balances are working out?
Definitely. Basically, everything that we mentioned is a result of some form of balance issue. So, I think a great example of this right now is the way blink and pylons work. Like, I can't have, like, just a little crack next to my natural expansion or like around the main base, or I can't have like my main and natural on the same level and then have like just a little wall like you could in Brood War. The reason for that is like pylon warp ins, so like I can put a pylon on one side of the wall and then just warp over on the other side, and that can be like hard to counter, stuff like that. So Maybe if they change that, then we could start experimenting with that. Like, that's another reason why you don't see low ground mains, is because you have to deal with pylon warp ins. And people have tried to make arguments for siege tanks, but it really is pylon warp ins, like warping into your main. Like, if you have a wall in between, at least you need to get line of sight over the other side. So you need an observer, you need to run a probe in or something like that. But like if it's on low ground, you just put the pylon on the high ground and you can warp it below it, right? And if the main is down there and you're like in the natural, then you can do some pretty silly stuff. So a lot of it is like a factor of balance. Tanks cause a lot of problems as well. So like if you have, you know, minerals that are like exposed to one avenue of attack, and like there's just like a one little nook where if you put a tank, it's like really strong, and
like
it manages to hit the gas. Yeah. Antigua Shipyard has a problem like that as well, where you, like, at least on the latter version, you can, in the third, you can put a siege tank, or you can in the main base, and you can hit the gas on the other base across from it. So like the main can hit the gas in the third, and the third can hit the gas in the main. And like in order to hit that by ground, you have to run all the way down your natural, around the map, and then back up to that third on the other side in order to actually kill the tank. So like stuff like that.
Now actually bring that up so people can actually see exactly what you're illustrating. This being the tank positioning, it can actually reach out to hit the gas. And
Yeah.
you've got to go all the way around here to attack the tank.
Yeah. On the latter version, this is fixed on the competitive versions. I know, like, I made a version and I made a thread and I pointed this out to tournament organizers, like, fix this if you're going to use this map. So that's not a problem on, like, the MLG version and stuff like that. But, like, a lot of spaces like that, you'll have to put buffer room so that tanks can't hit stuff like that. Putting destructible rocks near the main base of natural expansion, so, like, I can't block a third that's flush up against the main with destructible rocks. Not that I would really want to, because, like, you can charge a void around the rocks and run into the main base and blow a bunch of stuff up. Is another concern that we've heard. A lot of little things like that.
They do have on Metropolis.
Yeah. It's one of the things that you can do on Metropolis, but, like, the way the rush distance in that map kind of works, like, you've already kind of taken control of your natural expansion, and Void Ray won't be able to just completely run you over on that map, I think. So it's not as bad there.
I feel like watchtowers are becoming such a questionable factor of map balance these days. Like, okay, we need them, but they have...
Do you, though?
I feel like watchtowers are just defining and limiting the way that you can carry out balance on a map, like, by a ton. Because you can't have watchtowers too close to your third or your fourth. You can't have them covering all the attack paths, and I mean, there's just so much that a tower can limit, and what a tower can cause problems with, and it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's like you have, I think that layouts in general just cause too much problems with how you have to lay out your towers. And oh no, we are going weird.
Yeah, we lost Prodigy here for a second, but hopefully we'll get him back in just a moment. So I'll make sure to re-invite him to the chat real quick, just in case. Maybe he just lost internet for a second. But go ahead and continue on with your thought, and hopefully we can get Prodigy back in just a second.
Oh, I can wait for him. There he is.
We got him, so to speak, at least. We got a picture of him. He's like...
I don't know what happened. Like, I was just sitting here and I was about to talk and I was like, ding, you have left the hangout. And I'm like, what? I didn't do any. I didn't even have my hands on my mouse.
Maybe you forgot to tell it you're still there. Maybe. I don't know. I may have just lost everybody, so we'll see. So just hold on for a split second, guys, here. What I'm going to actually do, I'm going to call them via Skype real quick. I won't have video on them. I'm purposely calling you guys on Skype real quick, because for some reason the Google Hangout is all of a sudden frozen and I can't hear you guys.
Uh-oh.
But at least now we have audio back on the show here, because that's what's important. Waiting for everybody else to answer. Network failure. I'm going to try again to see if I can get it back up. But I want to make sure that we had audio. If you want to, you can go ahead and try and continue your point, and hopefully I can get a Google Plus back up in just a second, or maybe I'll have to start a new Hangout.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah. Always a bonus. Technical issues, man. The internet. It's just the way it is, guys. It's just the way it is. So anyways, I'm trying to remember what we were actually talking about before we started having everything crash. I'm going to actually restart that. See if I can get it to come up. We originally were using Skype, then we stopped using Skype because we were having some issues with Skype. Moved to Google Plus Hangouts. And now today we're having an issue with Google Plus Hangouts, so it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, you just can't win, right? I'm going to start a new Hangout. See if it'll load. I wonder if Google Plus Hangouts crashed for some reason. They took their server down or something. Yeah, if you guys are going to have any questions for the Q&A, because we're going to be doing that in just a second, go ahead and start preparing them now, because we were getting ready to wrap up. We were just talking about balance and Zalaga Towers a little bit. I'm going to see if I can get my man Prodigy back here in the call with the rest of us.
La la la.
So hopefully he will join our call. I haven't invited to the call, so can one of you guys tell him to accept it?
I don't know. Caleb did.
Oh dear.
So anyways, guys, I'm going to bring up a couple little pictures here real quick while we're waiting, just so that there's nothing on the screen here. Oh, you know what I got, Travis? I got something for you. Actually got a different picture for Superman here. We'll bring that up real quick. So sorry about the slight delay, guys. We're gonna get rolling again in just 1 second. We're gonna be moving into Q&A in a moment. So, sorry, Travis. This is the only one I have of you. You know what picture I'm talking about, don't you?
Oh.
I said it's the only one I got, man. I don't know what else to tell you.
This is horrible.
It's even better because I don't even have one of Josh, so like he's gonna get one of the goofy animals. Like I just don't have another picture to go with for him right now. I'll eventually have to get a picture of him to throw up there instead of the rabbit chilling at his desk.
The puppet master.
Exactly. Alright, so hopefully he'll get in here. Call him again, please.
Uh-oh. Hit video call.
Oh, I got him?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got him now. Yes, we have you now. We have everybody now. Good. So, okay. We have everybody back here once again. Go ahead and finish up, you guys. You were talking about Zonlaga Towers really quick to wrap everything up before we ended up going into the Q&A.
Well, I don't know where we got cut off, but I was
All right,
gonna say.
you know what? Screw it. We're going to break. We'll be back. Q&A. Send us your questions. Bye.
Bye.
Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to Mappers. Of course we have still photos of everybody because the Google Hangout froze, and then on top of that Skype I can't get the video to work there either, so we don't have any video right now, but we are going to still go into Q&A. Everybody is here, so I do have everybody on audio, and of course you can see me talking because I capture my webcam straight through to XSplit, so my webcam gets to be here, but nobody else's does, sadly. But we're going to go into Q&A. We got a couple of people posting some questions. If anybody else has any questions, you can feel free to post them as we're going through here. You can either tweet them to at VP Nursky, at ESV Superman, at ProdigySC, and at IronmanSC2, or you can just post them in the chat. So I'm going to go into questions, Q&A. Hopefully that's still working for me. We do have Devious26 adding, which map used competitively right now do you think you guys is the best? Also, which one is the worst?
Vicious.
I was
Clear
going
bias.
to say Daybreak, but they screwed that one up. I still think
Well-
Daybreak in the tournament version is probably the best.
Mm.
Daybreak
wouldn't
Ellie
say-
is the worst.
I wouldn't say Daybreak is the best, but it's like I've said before, like it was the first map to show player like the StarCraft community as a whole what StarCraft 2 really can be like, in the sense of like that there's tactical engagements and controlling map space and positioning and stuff like that versus like just grabbing and holding bases and like running death balls into each other, or like just making 200 supply of roaches and attack moving stuff and never stopping and stuff like that. Daybreak is definitely a great map. I still personally really like Cloud Kingdom. The more games I watch in Ohana, I really like. And, you know, obviously I have a significant amount of ESV bias, but like those two, like the more games I watch on them, the more I like. And I don't know, like Daybreak, like to me, like I always knew StarCraft the potential to show like those really cool tactical engagements and positioning and stuff like that. So like I'm really glad that it exists, and like I definitely realize it's a fantastic map, don't get me wrong. It's like by far one of it's definitely top 5, but I think Cloud Kingdom or Hana.
I don't know. I think they're really... Well, I guess I take it back. I think Daybreak is probably one of the better examples of a good map, but I think at the same time, there's different matchups that make the map good for particular maps. Like Ohana, for example, like TVP is pretty fun to watch on that, but not so much TVZ or PVZ. So I think Ohana is a good TVP map, whereas Cloud Kingdom is a good TVZ map, you know, or PVZ or something like that. So I don't think there really is a way to say which map is the best. I just think it depends on the matchup.
That's fair. I can't say I disagree.
Yeah. And the worst map.
The sound of silence.
So we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next question then. If you guys got nothing else on that one, we go up to, I believe Sumiden was asking a question. He's talking about the map pool for Blizzard WCS has been announced. In case any of you guys don't know what that is,
Oh my god!
instead of BlizzCon this year, they're still gonna have the tournament that normally would lead into BlizzCon. After the tournament gets towards the finals, they were talking about the finals going to be held in China this year. I can't help but feel like maybe there's a little bit of promotional consideration with the whole Mr. Pandaria thing that they have coming out. But regardless of any conspiracy theories you could go into, nonetheless, the map pool for the WCS has been set by Blizzard. And I'm going to read off the map pool. I'm going to actually bring it up onto the screen here so everybody can see the map pool as well. But I find this a little bit interesting because people are normally pretty critical of the LE versions of the maps, and of course our tournaments are like, well, we're never going to use them because they're not good. Blizzard, on the other hand, in their infinite wisdom, and I'll bring this up on desktop right now because this is the map pool for the WCS, is going to be WCS Daybreak LE, but they do have neutral supply depots at the ramps between each player's spawning base and natural. Ohana LE, same thing. Cloud Kingdom LE, neutral supply depots added. Then Metropolis LE, and then Antigua Shipyard, Tal'Darim LE, and then Shakiris Plateau, no close by ground spawn. So essentially they're just importing what's the current map pool into the WCS. So they're essentially going to be using the ladder maps for competitive play.
But they're putting supply depots on there too, so...
Yes, which I find interesting that they added those, because the reason why they haven't added them, in case anybody doesn't know, is Blizzard thinks people aren't smart enough to understand why they're there.
That's stupid. Like, learning Zerg mechanics isn't hard enough. Or, understanding, like, Terran control groups. Like, that isn't hard enough for a new player to get used to, whereas a depot just sits there for a game and you learn it after a game.
Yeah, like... last episode, I think it was, we talked about Blizzard's philosophy on a lot of this stuff and how, like, they make a lot of great strides and then they do something incredibly stupid. And this is yet another example of one step forward, two steps back. So, as if they didn't shoot everything in the foot enough by releasing Daybreak LE or Metropolis LE, but now they're using it in what could very well be one of the biggest tournaments of the year. No, that is, you know, to be decided, but like, this is just so incredibly stupid for so many reasons that I can't stress enough. The first of which is now this validates, too many letters, validates in the eyes of tournament organizers, Daybreak LE and Metropolis LE. So they go, oh, well, World Championship did it. That's like Blizzard's biggest tournament, so we can use LE. It's like totally no problem. And now maybe we might see LE in more tournaments, at which point I will climb through the internet and punch the tournament organizer in the throat, because that's just so stupid. Ohana and Cloud Kingdom LE, I mean, they took out the Space Sharks, so like, you guys are just assholes, but other than that, they didn't like completely destroy the map. I mean, we've talked about what they did to Ohana already aesthetically, but
the map layout's essentially the same.
Yeah, the map is going to play effectively the same as it would have before, and it's just less pretty. Metropolis we've already confirmed to be just straight up stupid, thanks to the the rocks and the islands. WCS Antigua Shipyard cross spawns only and a normal mineral. Well,
we just talked about that.
We just talked about that today. Like, I would rather watch Core Hall Compound, because like it's another 1v1 map, and it's just not as lame as Antigua Shipyard. Tall Dream Altar LE, whatever. WCS, no Shakuro's Plateau, no close ground spawns. This is basically a 3-player map, so I don't know. I'm not super against it, aside from the fact that it's old. But again, validates Daybreak in the eyes of tournament organizers. It's hypocritical of them saying that, like, we don't want ladder editions in tournaments, and then they go and do this, and like, just one step forward, two steps back is really how I can sum it up.
Yeah, I just think it's really interesting that they would go. I mean, I guess I understand. Actually, you know what? I don't understand it. I mean, the reality is like, the WCS is supposed to obviously be Blizzard's premier tournament, and when they're going to push these maps that are dumbed down because they don't think players can understand a base with less minerals and gas versus, a base with more minerals and gas. They don't think people will understand a creep tumor at a island base versus destructible rocks at an island base. So they just throw them in there because they don't think players can grasp it. But then to go ahead and take that step where you move that from a ladder scenario, which already, it bugs me a little bit that they put it on the ladder, but then they not only put it on the ladder to deal, from the bronze to the masters disparity of knowledge and gameplay and whatnot, but then they're going to use it in their tournament as well. I mean, to me, that just kind of, like, it's a slap in the face of anybody who has a brain cell in their head, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, to be like, okay, we're going to push our ladder editions of the maps, even though in a tournament situation, it's going to really screw with how good these maps have been, and potentially could actually make them look really bad, right? Because we haven't seen high-level play on a regular basis on Daybreak LE or Metropolis LE, but we're going to. And the question is, how much is it going to change things? Is it going to break the map? Is it now going to become favorable? Because there's, like, literally no place testing on the LE versions of these maps yet, really. I mean, they've just been added into this new season, and they're already going to be being played in tournaments. And if one player figures out a way that maybe on Daybreak LE, that now that fourth base, putting it on that forward base, like a planetary fortress for Terran or something like that, is going to be your win situation, where it's like, I put a planetary at my third, I put a planetary on this base, now I'm at 4 bases, I can mass units and kill you 9 times out of 10. Now that could instantly become a problem, where the whole reason why that forward base was less minerals in the first place was because They didn't want that base to be a strong, defendable position that would also give you a lot of income. Like, it's done intentionally that there was less gas and minerals at that base. There's a reason they do it. It's kind of the same thing that goes back to Tal'Darim, where they added minerals and gas to the third base and put destructible rocks in. It was a half base originally for a region. The map designer tested it as a full base versus the reduced base, and the full base made it too strong in a lot of different matchups at the highest level to have that be a full base. It was too easy to defend a 3-base look. So I mean, I don't know. I don't see how you justify it, I guess, to answer your question from my point of view, and I don't think anybody else here does either.
What I hate about it is it removes creativity, because if you make maps with really new feature like let's say egg walls, and then for some reason it enters in the ladder, what will happen with the map? What will Blizzard do with the egg walls? Like, will they make it destructible rocks or something? So it can prevent a lot of new things, I think, and I really dislike it.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
All right, so I think we've thoroughly answered that question. That we're definitely not on board with the whole LE in the WCS. But we're going to actually start wrapping things up, guys. So how about Sukaru, man? How about you start us off with any shout-outs or anything you have to close things up today?
So you can follow me on Twitter at ESV_superhuman. And I tweet sometimes about maps. And lately about a map name on the for-you map, Karlstegen, which some people don't like the name. And in 10 minutes starts the current weekly, day 3. So you can tune in, grab something to eat or drink, and continue your journey in StarCraft.
And Iron Man?
Hi. Yeah, I'm Iron Man. My Twitter is underneath my creepy face, Iron Man SC2. I will tweet if I map stream, which I'm not going to be able to map stream for a little while because of the Korean Weekly, and they're constantly running the broadcasts and everything like that. So, but I will tweet often. Yeah, just shout out to the team, and also a special shout out to Jackie Prime, who is now an ESV map maker. Really great guy, really friendly, really awesome map maker. So we're really glad to have him on the team and to be able to work with him. There is a thread in the StarCraft 2 forum devoted to him, so you guys can check that out. Just published a new map called ESV Spring. It's in the map forum on Team Liquid, so go ahead and check that out. It is going through a couple changes right now with the help of Prodigy, who is to my left. And yeah, so up to you, Josh.
Yeah, be sure to follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/ProdigySC. I've been bitching about all kinds of map-related things these last few days, but tweet about maps, StarCraft, the Korean Weekly, tribes, a lot of tribes as usual, because the game is great. And, yeah, beyond that, be sure to check out the Korean Weekly, which is going to be going live 20 minutes from now if you are watching live. So be sure to check that out. That's where you're going to be able to find all of the great ESV maps. We're going to have Orb and Adebisi casting today, I think. And it's going to be the finals for Week 1. So we're going to be able to check out some more games on Vicious and Frigid Pass, as we're going to finally see some best of 5s. So definitely looking forward to that. Vicious, of course, being a map of mine. Recently added into DreamHack alongside Frigid Pass by Time Twisters. So if you guys are looking to get a preview on those maps before DreamHack does go down, then be sure to check out the Korean Weekly today at www.esvtv.com.
And then, of course, you guys can follow me on Twitter right below here. It is at VP Nursky. I, of course, am going to be having some of my casting featured in the upcoming MLG Arena qualifier broadcasts. I don't know specifically when that'll be. I did a couple of games with Gwyn, did some on my own, so those will be coming up on the MLG broadcasts for their term arena qualifiers. And then, of course, you guys can catch me over when I'm doing broadcasting for the PokerStrategy.com Zeke tournament over on Zeke.tv, where I will be broadcasting there every Monday for their daily, and then every other weekend I will be doing their Saturday finals. I know this week they're doing Demaga. That's going to be on Sunday, though, around noon Central Standard Time. And then, of course, you guys can follow me at my stream as well, twitch.tv/Nursky. I was trying to stream EU Ladder, but for some reason I was getting some really bad lag, so I wasn't able to do it just yet. I'm going to see if I can get that fixed today and stream some ladder later today. So if you guys want to check me out laddering, I'm playing right now on the EU server. I made it. I placed Diamond in the first day, placed Platinum the first day, made it to Diamond the second day, and going to try and bump myself up to Masters on the EU server over the next day or two here over the weekend. So I think that's going to wrap. I think that's going to wrap it up for now, though, guys. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning into our broadcast once again. Feel free to go to our forum thread on Team Liquid, where you can either give us feedback or suggest topics to the show that you would like to hear about. And then, of course, make sure to follow all these guys on Twitter, follow myself on Twitter, and we will be having another show next week, as usual, at the same time, 4 p.m. Eastern. So, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. We're going to be out here for now. Bye.
See ya.
Always
Damn
with the
you.
yawns. Always with the yawns.
I called it.
You called it? Can you really call a yawn? I guess you can call it, but should you call a yawn?
I'm in there.
Oh, man. Time for dinner. Time to go.